What's up guys? In today's video I'm going to be going over a Moze build that I've put together using mainly the green monster and weapons that will also get some insane bonuses from it. I've done a decent amount of testing with all the different weapons you could possibly use, and I'll be telling you guys my favorites. So before we get into the build, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Borderlands 3 Mayhem 4 Moze builds. And besides that, I'd like to give a big shout out to Prismatic. He does a lot of game math and testing on the Gearbox forums, and he answered a lot of questions for me while I was putting this build together, and he helped me out a lot. So thank you. Anyways though, let's get straight into what this build does. Basically, we're using the green monster and other elemental anointments to add a bunch of bonus elements to all of our weapons, and we're also using a build that synergizes with this idea as well. So first, I actually want to go over the skill trees. This is basically a triple tree setup. We're using some for the road to get infinite ammo for 5 seconds when we hop out of Iron Bear. Not only will this synergize with our class mod, but we'll also be using another amazing gun I'll be mentioning later. The rest of the skill trees are basically set up to give us good Iron Bear cooldown and also some good base damage. Drowning in Brass and Armored Infantry are really the only two skills we have that give us good base damage to work with, so it was important to get to these skills. We could have used Short Fuse instead, but I felt that these two were important for what we ultimately wanted to do, and they add more to the build. Besides that, I've got 3 points in Vampire. I feel like this is the sweet spot for survivability with this skill. I was actually trying and playing with 2 points so that I could have the full 5 in Drowning in Brass, and I really felt like I was missing the 3rd point. Now, if you feel more comfortable with more points into Vampire, you'll unfortunately have to take them out of Drowning in Brass, which I don't suggest doing. The maximum I would go into Vampire is probably 4 points. You want as many points in Drowning in Brass as possible. Besides that, we've got Means of Destruction and Pull the Holy Pin. These two skills work great together to trigger Redistribution and Vampire. And besides all that, we have all of our bonus Incendiary damage skills. And finally, the last and probably the most important skill is Grizzlied. This skill basically allows us to get in and out of Iron Bear constantly. We're getting kills so easily that our Iron Bear should always be back up. You definitely want a class mod or artifact with cooldown reduction as well, but Grizzlied is actually really nuts and really good at bringing Iron Bear back up. And finally, for Iron Bear's weapons, we're using target softening. We're just going to be hopping in and out of Iron Bear to constantly trigger our anointments, and we have Auto Bear who will get a couple shots off for us. So yeah, so now that you guys understand my skill tree, let's get into the weapons. Now, most of the anointments we're using are the elements for the next 2 magazines. I highly suggest that most of these you look for Moze's 125% fire damage. This is one of the strongest anointments in general. Definitely one of the strongest that we can get on guns we're using. Otherwise, on our splash guns, you definitely want the 160% splash damage. So first, let's talk about the Redline. This is my favorite bossing weapon for this build. You guys have a lot of options when it comes to bossing weapons, but the Redline with 160% splash damage will take out pretty much any boss in the game, and it's just so much fun to hop out of Iron Bear and literally spam this thing for like 8 to 10 seconds straight, and then, you know, reload your gun and all the stickies go off. Now, obviously, you're going to want whatever element you're bossing against, so like Shock, Fire, and Corrosive are 3 of the most solid options. But Radiation is a great general choice that will get through a lot of different bosses. Now, I should mention, when fighting against normal bosses, and especially when using like the Redline just to take out bosses, you probably would much rather wear either a Minesweeper or a Bloodletter class mod. Sometimes you get those great insta-kills from Minesweeper, but Bloodletter and a Deathless will just give you some more base damage overall. And against certain bosses, the green monster won't really matter for our strategy. and the extra corrosive won't matter either. Now I'm gonna go over the next couple of guns at once because they're all very similar mobbing weapons. Basically, we've got the Brainstormer, the Redistributor, and the Recursion. Now, the reason why we're using these guns is because the more elements you add to them, the crazier damage they do, the more ricochets, the more projectiles, the more chains, everything. So for these 3 guns, you want the next 2 magazine anointments. It can be any element at all. Now for the Brainstormer, I definitely suggest trying to find Moze's 125% incendiary next 2 magazines anointment. But yeah, that's probably going to be insane on the Brainstormer. I also had a radiation redistributor with that anointment, and both of these weapons literally shred mobs. For the Recursion, it actually just doesn't matter at all. The Recursion is so powerful. You can really use any next 2 magazine anointment on it as you want. Basically, you just want a different element than what your weapons are. Now, what's great about this is these are normally weapons that Amara, Zane, and Flak have really easy access to anointments. They can use them really well. But Moze actually has this same kind of access. Basically, she can always have the next 2 magazines up because of her, not only her infinite ammo, but you can also get ammo back from throwing grenades. And then on top of that, we have our Green Monster class mod as like our final line of defense. It's always active. So as long as you spam one of these guns, you'll get an extra element. You'll get those extra ricochets, those extra projectiles, like everything. So that's what's actually really cool about the Green Monster. Now keep in mind, this thing isn't active on the first shot. You have to kind of hold down the trigger to trigger the Green Monster. The Recursion is the strongest by far. The Redistributor seems like it does a ton of damage, and the Brainstormer is the Brainstormer. It's really strong. It's actually really fun to mob with. It was actually my favorite weapon to mob with out of the 3 of these. And now when it comes to single targets, they're actually in the opposite order. The Brainstormer is by far the best for single targets, especially if you have the 125% incendiary for Moze anointment on it. Now, the Recursion is literally so powerful. The main downside to it is you literally kill so many enemies that there's only 1 target left, and then it can't do any damage to that single target. So that's a pretty good downside to have to a weapon. The Recursion is literally just so powerful for this build. And what's great, like I mentioned a second ago, is that it is actually a splash damage weapon. So it will trigger your different splash skills. So with that being said, and mentioning all of those different mobbing guns, you really only need one of those with the correct anointment to get through the raid. You definitely don't need all 3 of those weapons. One of those plus the correct Redlines plus maybe a couple other weapons I'm going to mention next. That's all you need. Either a Redistributor, a Brainstormer, or the Recursion. 1 out of 3 of those with a next 2 magazine anointments is going to be great. So besides that, I kept a Scourge and a Nukem on me because they're just great RPGs to spam with infinite ammo. They're also great splash damage weapons for your splash skills for getting grenades back. And finally, the last weapon I was actually using were the Cutsmen. The Shock and the Corrosive Cutsmen are actually great for Wotan himself. I found the Cutsmen, out of all the weapons I mentioned, to actually do the most damage for Wotan, still out of everything, which is kind of crazy. That's basically it for the weapons. Now onto the shield. I was actually using a recharger with the anointment to give us bonus health and shield when we exit Iron Bear. This basically just makes you super tanky and a lot harder to kill. What else is cool is that since we usually have good Iron Bear cooldown, this anointment will be active a lot of the time, and you'll be super tanky. You'll have a lot more survivability with this anointment. Now for the grenade, the Cloning Maddening Tracker will be the best grenade for Moze in general, but I didn't want to do that because it's a kind of hard grenade to find. You basically just have to get lucky and trade for it, or you have to scour vending machines, or a bunch of stuff like that. So I was actually using a Spring Epicenter. The Epicenter is actually a great grenade, and this is a legendary grenade that you can go farm for from a dedicated loot source. Basically, the only difference is that you actually have to aim this, but this is very strong at triggering Vampire, so it'll keep you alive. It also does good splash damage, the whole nine. Now you basically want elements on action skill end. You don't want corrosive and you don't want fire because those are both of Moze's elements that are built into her skills and her class mod. Now onto the artifact. I'm actually playing an auto idol because we're not playing a lot of splash weapons. I don't want to spam grenades too hard. So the fact that we're literally abusing our elements to make those mobbing weapons so strong, the auto idol is a great survivability option. If you guys are better at the game and you can survive without an auto idol, then the victory rush is going to be your best bet. It's just another multiplicative damage boost to Moze's damage calculation. And finally, for the class mod, like I mentioned, we're obviously using the green monster for mobbing. And then for bossing, you want a minesweeper or a bloodletter, and make sure to bring a deathless with your bloodletter. So that's pretty much it for the gear and the skills. Let's talk about how to play it. Basically, like every other Moze build, we're just shooting and throwing grenades as you need to though. We're not really spamming grenades like a lot of Moze builds kind of do. We're being more careful with them because we're not always using splash weapons. Most of the time, I found myself using the Brainstormer because I liked it. The auto idol kept me alive a lot, but there were definitely times where I needed to throw an epicenter. You can also throw the epicenter to activate redistribution, I believe. I noticed myself doing that as well. It was definitely clutch, and also means of destruction. And besides that, hopefully you can get a class mod or artifact with action skill cooldown rate. Between that and Grizzlied, you basically just want to hop in and out of Iron Bear every single chance you get. It's gonna reproc all of your anointments. It's just gonna like power you up every time you do it. The splash from the Iron Bear weapons also trigger your skills. So yeah, just hop in and out every chance you get, and then your mobbing weapons will literally do so much more damage every time. So besides that, this build is just extremely fun for me. My favorite gun by far is actually the Redline. When you hop out of Iron Bear and get the infinite ammo, you basically will one clip any boss or phase if they have immunity phases in the game almost. But I do have to say, I did notice that the anointment made a big difference. I was using an unanointed one and it didn't quite have the damage in Mayhem 4, so you really want to get the Redline with some sort of anointment on it. You hop out of Iron Bear, you spam this thing for like 8 seconds, you get literally so many stickies on an enemy. With Minesweeper, it's actually kind of insane as long as you're hitting crits. They'll literally just disappear sometimes. It's kind of funny. And then, yeah, besides that, like I said, Bloodletter is just a good solid damage increase. And other than that, this build is really straightforward. You get to just kill everything with these insane mobbing weapons, and then you have the super fun bossing weapon in the Redline. But anyways, guys, that's probably about it for the video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. As always, a big shout out and thank you to my channel members for their continued support. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you. And that's going to be it from me. I really enjoyed making this Moze build, but I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out.